The first rule they gave me when I came to work in that house was simple. Never go up to the third floor after dark. The second rule was even simpler. Never look the master in the eye. I broke both in my first week. It was almost midnight in Chicago, and the rain was coming down so hard it sounded like someone throwing handfuls of gravel at the windows. I was carrying little Matteo up the wide marble stairs because he wouldn't sleep. And he wouldn't sleep because the thunder scared him. And nothing scared a 1-year-old quite like the world shaking around him. He had his fist wrapped around a piece of my hair, and his cheek pressed to my shoulder. And I was whispering to him in the dark, telling him the storm was just the sky clearing its throat. The Marchetti mansion was the kind of place that swallowed sound. 40 rooms, maybe more. Floors so polished I could see the chandeliers upside down in them. Men in dark suits who never smiled, who stood at the doors and the gates and the ends of the hallways like furniture that breathed. I had been there 11 days, and I still didn't understand the rules of the place, only that there were many, and that breaking them cost more than a job. I knew what kind of house it was. Everyone in the city knew the name Marchetti, the way you know the name of a sickness. People said it in low voices, the way you'd say the word for something you didn't want to wake. They controlled the docks and half the judges, and the kind of money that didn't come from anything you could say out loud. And at the top of it all was a man I had only seen twice. Both times from far away, both times for less than a breath. Cassio Marchetti, the boss, the one they called the cold man, because in 9 years no one had seen him smile. I wasn't supposed to be his anything. I was hired to clean and to mind the baby, the son of his dead brother, an orphan the way I was an orphan, which was maybe why they handed him to me without a second thought. The household manager, a sharp woman named Greta, had looked me over once and said the boy didn't like anyone, so it wouldn't matter if I was useless with him. But Matteo had stopped crying the moment I picked him up, and Greta had pressed her lips together like that was somehow my fault. So there I was at midnight, climbing toward the nursery on the 3rd floor, the floor I was told to stay away from after dark, because the nursery was up there and a scared baby doesn't care about rules. I got him quiet. That was the thing I was good at, the only thing I'd ever been good at. Calming what was breaking. My mother used to say I had quiet hands. She'd been gone 4 years by then, and I still talked to her sometimes, in my head, when the nights got long. I sat down in the armchair by the window with Matteo on my chest, and I meant to put him in the crib the second his breathing went slow and even. I really did. But the chair was deep and warm, and his weight was the good kind of heavy, and the rain had softened into something gentler, and I had been awake since 5 that morning. I closed my eyes for 1 minute. When I opened them, there was a man standing in the doorway. I knew it was him before my mind caught up with my eyes. The whole room felt different with him in it. The air pulled tight like the moment before something falls. He was tall, dark hair pushed back, 2 days of stubble on a hard jaw, a white dress shirt open at the collar with the sleeves rolled to the forearm. There was a smear of something dark on his cuff that I decided immediately not to think about. And his eyes were on me, on us. On the baby asleep against my chest and my hand cupped over his small back. I should have jumped up. I should have apologized, explained, begged. That was the rule. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was, because moving would wake Matteo, and waking Matteo seemed, in that frozen second, like the worst crime. "You're in the wrong place," he said. His voice was low and even, no anger in it, which was somehow worse than anger. He was scared of the storm, I whispered. He just fell asleep. If I move him now, he'll start again. The man didn't answer. He looked at the boy for a long moment, and something moved across his face, something he caught and put away fast like a man slamming a drawer before you can see what's inside. I had heard he felt nothing. Standing there in the dim gold light of the lamp, I watched him feel something and hate himself for it. "What's your name?" he said. Not a question. A demand wearing the clothes of one. "Liliana, you don't look away," he said. "When I look at you, everyone in this house looks away." I was too tired to be careful. Maybe everyone in this house is more afraid of you than I am. For one heartbeat, I thought I'd just signed something I couldn't take back. His jaw tightened. Then he crossed the room, slow, and I held my breath. But he didn't reach for me. He reached for the boy. He slid his hands under Matteo with a care I would never have guessed those hands had, and lifted him off my chest, and the baby didn't even stir, and I felt the loss of that small warmth like a window opening in winter. He laid Matteo in the crib. He stood over it a second longer than he needed to. Then he turned back to me and said, in that same flat voice, "Don't break the rules again," and walked out. I sat in the dark with my heart slamming against my ribs, and one thought going around and around. He'd carried the baby like he was the most precious thing in the world. The cold man, the one who didn't smile. I should have been terrified. I wasn't. That was the first thing I got wrong about Cassio Marchetti, and it would not be the last. The next morning, Greta told me, with her mouth all pinched, that the boss had given new instructions. The nanny would now sleep on the 3rd floor, in the room beside the nursery, so the boy would never be alone in a storm again. "He's never given an instruction about that child in his life," she said, studying me like I was a stain she couldn't get out. "Whatever you did, don't think it means anything. Men like him don't keep things. They use them." I told her I understood. I didn't. But I moved my few things up to the 3rd floor that afternoon, into a room nicer than any I'd ever slept in, and I told myself it was for Matteo. That was true. It just wasn't the whole truth, and I already knew it. The house ran on routines, and I learned them. The men changed shifts at 6 and at midnight. Cars came at strange hours and left faster. Sometimes there was shouting behind the heavy doors of the study, low and fast. In Italian, I only half understood. Once I saw 2 men carry a third out to a car, and the third one wasn't walking on his own, and I learned to keep my eyes on my own hands. But Cassio started coming to the nursery, never when he thought I'd notice. I'd come up at night and find the door cracked, the way I'd never left it. Once I came in, and he was just standing there in the dark, watching the boy breathe, and he left without a word the moment he heard me, like I'd caught him doing something shameful. I started leaving the door open on purpose. I started waiting up. "You can come in," I said one night, to his shape in the hallway. "He likes it. He sleeps better when someone's here." He came in. He didn't sit. "He's my brother's son," Cassio said, after a long time. "Marco. They killed him in front of his own house. The boy was inside." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. And he looked at me like nobody had said those 2 words to him in years, and he didn't know what to do with them. "Everyone tells me what a tragedy it was," he said. "You're the first one who looked sorry instead of scared." That was the night it started, really, though neither of us would have called it anything. We talked. Not about the things he did, never that, but about the boy, and about the rain, and once about my mother, and once, just once, about his. He had a way of going very still when something mattered, like he was guarding it, and he watched my mouth when I talked, and I pretended I didn't notice, and the air between us got harder to breathe every single night. He never touched me. That was the worst part, and the best part. He'd stand close enough that I could feel the warmth coming off him, close enough that one small movement would have closed it, and he never closed it, and I lay awake afterward furious at him, and at myself. There was a humor in him I didn't expect either, dry and buried so deep most people never dug it up. The first time I made him almost smile, I felt it like a victory. I dropped a whole basket of the baby's laundry down the stairs, and stood there cursing in a way no maid was supposed to curse. And from the landing above me his voice came down, perfectly calm. I've had men killed for less language than that. And then, when I looked up horrified, the very corner of his mouth moved, just barely, and he said, "Relax. They had it coming. You only dropped socks." It wasn't a smile, but it was the ghost of one, and I carried it around for days. The peace didn't last, because peace never lasted in that house. There was a woman. Her name was Severia, and she belonged to the Lombardi family, who I gathered were powerful and old and important the way the Marchettis were. And she came to dinner one night in a red dress with a smile sharp enough to cut. Greta dressed me down for an hour about how to serve, what to pour, when to disappear. "She's going to be the mistress of this house," Greta said. "An arrangement between the families. Older than you. Don't get attached to anything here." I served the dinner. I poured the wine. I watched Severia put her hand on Cassio's arm and laugh at things that weren't funny, and I watched him sit there carved out of stone, answering in single words, and I told myself the cold knot in my chest was nothing. It was nothing. I was the help. But Severia saw me. Women like her always see the one who matters. After dinner, she found me in the hall, alone, and she looked me up and down the same way Greta had, except hers was a colder math. "The little Nanny," she said. "He looks at you, you know. He thinks no one notices. I notice everything." She stepped closer. Whatever you think this is, it has no future. This family runs on alliances, not on pretty girls who carry babies. When I marry him, you'll be gone by morning. So enjoy your storms while they last." I should have stayed quiet. "I'm not enjoying anything," I said. "I'm doing my job. Maybe you should try doing yours and figure out why he doesn't look at you." Her face went very still, and I understood I'd made an enemy who could end me with a phone call, but I didn't take it back, and I never would have. My mother raised me to bow my head to no one. Even when bowing, it would have been smart. That night, Cassio came up to the nursery and found me by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You're angry," he said. "You're getting married," I said. It came out before I could stop it. To her, the arrangement. Greta told me. He was quiet for a long time. "It's not a marriage," he finally said. "It's a treaty. The Lombardis and us have been at each other's throats for 30 years. The marriage ends it. It saves lives. Mine, the men's, the boys." He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something cracked in him, something tired. "I don't have the luxury of wanting things, Liliana. Men like me don't get to choose." "That's a lie people tell themselves," I said, "so they don't have to be brave." He took a step toward me, and the storm of him was right there, his chest rising and falling, his eyes dark, and I held my ground and tilted my chin up, and we stood like that, a breath apart, for what felt like an hour. He brought one hand up and touched my jaw, barely, his thumb against my cheek, and my whole body went still and burning at once. Then he dropped his hand and stepped back like he'd touched a flame. "Go to bed," he said roughly. "Lock your door." I didn't sleep. I lay there with the place his thumb had touched still warm, and I understood I was in something far over my head, and I understood I didn't want out. 3 days later, everything I thought I knew turned to ash. I was dusting the study, which I wasn't supposed to enter, but Greta had sent me in to do it before a meeting, and I knocked a folder off the edge of the desk by accident. The papers spilled. I knelt to gather them, and a photograph slid out, an old one, a crime scene, and I almost didn't look, but a name caught my eye on the report stapled behind it. My mother's name, Adriana Russo. My mother's maiden name, the name she'd hidden from, the name she made me promise to never say out loud. I read it standing up, then sitting down, then on the floor, because my legs stopped holding me. My mother hadn't died of a long illness in a quiet apartment the way I'd always believed. She'd been hiding. The report said the Russo family had been wiped out in a single night 14 years ago. Every name crossed off, every debt collected, on the orders of the Marchetti organization. A rival family, erased. And the man who'd given the order, the man whose signature was a cold, flat scrawl at the bottom of the page, was Cassio's father, the old boss, the one Cassio took everything from when he died. My mother had run. She'd changed our name. She'd worked 2 jobs and never told me why we moved so much, why she flinched at certain cars, why she made me swear on her deathbed that I would never trust a powerful man. She'd died still running, and I had walked, with my own 2 feet, into the house of the family that destroyed mine, and I had let myself fall for the man who sat at the head of its table. I don't remember standing up. I remember the nausea, the way the room tilted, my hands shaking so hard I dropped the photograph twice. I remember thinking I was going to be sick on the priceless rug. I remember the silence afterward, the terrible ringing silence, sitting on the floor of that study with my whole life rewritten around me. That was where Cassio found me. He came in and saw the spilled folder and saw my face, and he knew. He knew before I said a word. His face did something I'd never seen it do, a kind of collapse, fast, and then hidden. "Liliana Russo," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "Adriana Russo was my mother. Your family killed all of them. Your father. You knew." I looked up at him, and the room blurred. "Did you know who I was when you hired me? Is that what this is? Some kind of game? Keep the last Russo in your house where you can watch her?" "No." He crossed the room and dropped to his knees in front of me, which I had never seen him do for anyone, and gripped my shoulders. "I didn't know. I swear it on the boy. I didn't know your name until I saw that file 3 days ago. I pulled it because I wanted to know everything about you. And then I couldn't tell you. I didn't know how. You've known for 3 days. The betrayal of it landed worse than the murder somehow. The murder was his father's. The lie was his. You let me stand here and talk to you and almost... I couldn't finish it. You let me, knowing. Because the second you knew you'd leave, he said, and his voice broke on it. The cold man's voice, breaking. And I couldn't, Liliana. I have done unforgivable things. I was raised by the man who signed that order. I have his blood, and his name, and his sins. But I never touched your family. I was 16, and I have spent my whole life trying to be something other than him. And the one good thing, the only good thing, is you. And I knew the day you found out I'd lose it. I pulled away from him. I got to my feet. I was shaking, but I stood. I trusted you, I said. My mother told me never to trust men like you. She was running from your father when she died. From you. And I came here and I shook my head. I have to go. Liliana, I have to go, I said. Don't follow me. And he didn't. That was the thing that haunted me after. He let me walk out of the study, and he didn't follow. And I think that was the first truly selfless thing Cassio Marchetti ever did, letting me go when everything in him was built to hold. I packed my bag that night. It took 4 minutes. I owned almost nothing. I stood in the doorway of the nursery for a long time, watching Matteo sleep, and I cried so quietly it didn't wake him. He wasn't mine. None of this was mine. I had no right to the ache in my chest at leaving a baby who shared the blood of the family that killed mine, but he reached for me in his sleep, his little hand opening and closing on nothing, and I understood that the boy didn't know about families and treaties and signed orders. He only knew who held him when the storm came, and I couldn't decide if that made it easier to leave or impossible. I left before dawn. I didn't say goodbye to Cassio. I told myself it was over, that I'd done the brave thing, the smart thing, the thing my mother would have wanted. I lasted 9 days. I got a room across the city, a job at a diner, and I tried to start over, and every night I lay awake, and the silence had a Cassio-shaped hole in it. I told myself it was Matteo I missed. I half believed it. But the truth was uglier and simpler. I missed the man, the whole impossible blood-stained man, and hating his father didn't kill the wanting. It just made the wanting feel like a betrayal of my mother's memory. On the 9th day, Severia came to the diner. She slid into a booth in a coat worth more than the building, and waited until I had no choice but to take her order. Up close, her sharp smile was gone. She looked, for the first time, almost human. "You should know what you walked away from," she said. "He called off the wedding, 3 days after you left. He went to my father and tore up the treaty in front of the whole Lombardy table." She laughed, but it had no meanness in it, only disbelief. "Do you understand what that means? My father wanted his head for it. There's a war coming now, over you. A nanny. He's risking everything in that house. Every life he was so worried about, because he couldn't stand to marry someone who wasn't you." She stood, dropped money on the table she hadn't ordered anything for. "I hated you, but I've never had a man do for me what he just threw away an empire to not do. If you have any sense, you'll go to him. And if you have any heart, you'll go before they kill him for it." I stood in that diner with a coffee pot in my hand, and the whole thing came apart in me. He hadn't followed me, because he was busy setting himself on fire to prove he meant it. I went back that night. The gates knew me. The men let me through, though I felt them watching, felt the house holding its breath. There were more guns than before, more men, a war footing I could feel in the air. I found him in the study, the same room where everything had broken, and he looked up and went absolutely still, like he didn't trust his own eyes. "You tore up the treaty," I said. "Yes, there's going to be a war. There was always going to be a war," he said. "I just stopped pretending I'd marry to avoid it. I'll win it the honest way. With these." He held up his hands, the hands I'd seen carry a baby and, I knew, do worse. "I don't want a treaty, Liliana. I want—" He stopped. Cassio Marchetti, who was never at a loss, was at a loss. "I rehearsed this. For 9 days. Now you're here and I can't remember any of it. My family is dead because of yours," I said. "I can't pretend that isn't true. I can't wake up next to you and forget my mother died running from your name." "I'm not asking you to forget," he said. He came around the desk. "I'm asking you to let me spend the rest of my life being the proof your mother was wrong about one of us. I can't give your family back. I can't undo what he did. But I burned the treaty. I'll burn the rest of it. I'll tear this whole filthy thing down to the studs if you ask me to. Because 9 years I felt nothing. And then you fell asleep in a chair with my brother's son on your chest. And I remembered what it felt like to Want to keep someone alive for reasons that had nothing to do with use. I was crying again. I hated how easily he did that to me. You hurt me, I said. The lie. You hurt me worse than your father ever could, because I didn't see it coming from you. I know. He stopped an arm's length away, the way he always did, leaving me the space to choose. I'll spend as long as it takes earning it back. I'm not a patient man about anything else. About you, I'll wait. And that, after everything, was what undid me. Not the Berne Treaty, not the war, not the grand gestures. The man who took whatever he wanted, standing still, leaving me room to walk away again. I didn't walk away. I closed the distance myself. I crossed the space he'd never crossed. All those nights. And I put my hands flat on his chest and felt his heart going like he'd run for miles. And I tilted my face up the way I had a dozen times waiting for something that never came. This time he didn't step back. He kissed me like a man who'd been holding his breath since the first night, one hand cradling the back of my head, the other splayed against my spine, pulling me in until there was nothing between us but the heat of it. I had imagined it being rough, because everything about him was hard. It wasn't. It was careful, almost reverent, like he was afraid I'd dissolve, and that care broke something open in me that the war and the secrets never reached. Tell me to stop, he murmured against my mouth, and I'll stop. Don't you dare, I said. He lifted me like I weighed nothing and carried me up the stairs, past the men who looked at the floor, past the rules I'd been given my first day, to a room I'd never been allowed in. And there, in the dark, the cold man came apart for me, and I came apart for him, his mouth tracing every word he didn't know how to say into my skin, my hands learning the shape of all his hidden scars. I had spent so long thinking I'd be at his mercy that a man like him took, but it was his breath that caught, his control that broke, his name that I held in my hands like the only true thing I owned. I was the one undone, and the one in command at once, trembling and certain, his whole guarded body answering to the smallest movement of mine. It was always you, he said against my throat, his voice wrecked. From the first night, you're the only thing I've ever had that I didn't want to ruin. And later, in the quiet, his arms locked around me like he expected me to vanish. I'm not going to lose you, whatever it costs. Navsegda, the Russian their world borrowed for vows. Always. I lay awake after, listening to his heart finally slow, and I thought about my mother, and for the first time the thought didn't only hurt. She'd told me never to trust a powerful man, but she'd also told me to bow my head to no one. I'd kept the second promise, and maybe keeping it was how I'd found the one man powerful enough to burn his own world down rather than make me bow. The war came, the way Cassio said it would. The Lombardis moved, and there was a terrible week I'll never fully describe, of men in the halls, and the baby, and me hidden in a safe room, and Cassio coming back at dawn with that dark smear on his cuff, and a look in his eyes I had to learn to live beside. I won't pretend that part was clean. It wasn't. His world is what it is. But he ended it the way he said, the honest way, on his own terms, and when it was over, the name. Lombardi didn't threaten that house anymore, and Severia, who'd warned me, was the one who brokered the peace that held. She and I would never be friends, but she came to the wedding, and she lifted her glass to me, and that was its own kind of ending. Because there was a wedding, a real one, in the spring, in the garden, with Matteo in a tiny suit refusing to walk down the aisle until I held out my arms and then running so fast he nearly fell. I wore my mother's ring, the only thing of hers I had, and I felt her there, and I made her a different promise than the one she'd asked for. I promised her I'd been brave enough to trust the right one. Cassio stood at the end of that aisle and watched me come toward him, and in front of his whole world, all those men who'd never seen it, all those families who'd sworn it couldn't happen. The cold man smiled, wide and helpless and stunned at his own face for doing it, like something frozen 9 years was finally cracking in the sun. Greta cried. I heard later that 2 of the guards bet on whether it was real. It was real. We adopted Matteo as our own that same year, and he stopped being my brother's son and started being just our son, the way these things happen, quietly, in the holding of a child when the storm comes. I run that house now, all 40 rooms, and the men don't look at the floor when I pass anymore. They nod, because I am the mistress of it, and I earned the place the hard way, and everyone in it knows the story of how. The girl who didn't look away. Last night there was a storm, the real kind, the kind that shakes the windows and makes the sky clear its throat. Matteo padded into our room with his fist already reaching for my hair, and I scooped him up, and Cassio pulled us both down against him in the dark, his arm a wall around the two of us, and the boy was asleep in a minute. I lay there between the two people the world had told me I had no right to, in the house that had taken everything from my family, and then somehow given me everything back. The thunder rolled and Matteo didn't even stir. Cassio's lips found my temple. For 9 years, no one had seen that man smile. I fall asleep beside it now, every night, in a house that used to frighten me and doesn't anymore, with the rain on the glass and his heart steady under my hand. The city is still dangerous out there beyond the gates. It always will be. But inside these walls, with his arm around me and our boy between us, I finally don't need to protect myself from anything. It's just the sound of our peace, and it's mine, and I'm not going anywhere.